My husband tried to eliminate me to gain everything, but his plans were ruined when my name appeared in the will. Like every morning, I woke up earlier than most people in the city. My days always started before anyone else's, a habit I'd developed over years of building my success. While the city was still sleeping peacefully, I was already at my desk checking emails and preparing for meetings. I ran my company like a Swiss watch, precise and reliable, never missing a beat. Every new challenge that came my way was just another opportunity to prove that nothing could slip through my fingers. I was born a strategist, always calculating, always shining, always 2 steps ahead of my competitors. The name Amy Miller had become synonymous with success in our business circles. But what I was most proud of wasn't my wealth or my business achievements, it was my marriage to Justin. I believed with all my heart that he was my greatest partner in life. Justin was that kind of man who could light up any room he walked into, with a charisma that drew people to him naturally. To everyone who saw us together, he appeared to be the perfect husband. He was attentive, loving, and always ready to support my dreams, no matter how ambitious they seemed. For years, I truly believed I was living in a modern fairy tale. I often asked myself, what more could any woman want? I was convinced that I had everything a woman could dream of. A successful career and what seemed to be a husband who loved me unconditionally. That morning, as I was packing for our trip to the Alps, Justin came up behind me and wrapped his arms around my waist. He whispered in my ear, asking if I was ready to beat the competition. I was always captivated by that crooked smile of his, the one that I would later recognize as a sign of his deception. "I'm ready to win," I replied, giving him a quick kiss before returning to packing my ski equipment. Looking back now, I realize how blind I was to the signs, how willing I was to see only what I wanted to see in the man I had chosen to share my life with.
Behind that perfect smile, Justin harbored a heart corrupted by ruthless ambition, a darkness that would soon threaten to destroy everything. His every gesture, once seeming born of love, was coldly calculated like moves in a deadly chess game. Every caress, every whispered word of devotion was merely another piece in his elaborate deception. While Amy believed they were building a life together, her husband saw each of her successes as stepping stones to his ultimate betrayal. Every triumph she achieved was just another jewel he planned to steal from her crown. For years, Justin had played the role of the perfect husband while quietly weaving a web of destruction. In his twisted mind, the fortune Amy had built through years of dedication wasn't meant to be shared. It was destined to be his alone, a prize he had coveted since the day they met. Finally, he had discovered a way to claim it all without raising suspicion. "This will be our last trip together," he thought darkly, watching Amy close her suitcase, his eyes gleaming with hidden malice. She turned to him with that radiant smile, her eyes filled with pure love, not knowing this would be the final time she would look at him with such trust. The idea of an accident had crystallized in his mind. Extreme sports competitions always carried inherent risks that no one would question. One wrong move, one moment of distraction, and tragedy could strike in the unforgiving mountain wilderness. A simple accident would be enough to set his plan in motion. No one would ever suspect the grieving husband who had always appeared so devoted. They would all see him as the heartbroken widower, destroyed by a cruel twist of fate. That same week, Justin had met with Aaron, the man he had chosen to execute his sinister plan. Aaron was a former mercenary, a professional who asked no questions and performed his tasks with deadly precision. Justin delivered his instructions to Aaron coldly and clearly. "Make sure Amy dies during the competition. There should be no mistakes." Justin had agreed to pay an extravagant sum for this service, but he viewed it as an investment in his future. Once Amy was gone, everything she owned would become his, a fortune built on the foundation of ultimate betrayal. "See you on the mountain," were Aaron's final words before he disappeared like a shadow into the gathering darkness.
At the airport, while waiting for our flight to the Alps, I held Justin's hand with confidence, completely unaware of the danger that was stalking me. I was full of dreams and plans for our future together, suggesting that after the competition, we should take a longer vacation, just the two of us. I remember suggesting the Caribbean, thinking how wonderful it would be to relax without a care in the world. I still believed we had a future together, one we would plan and share. Justin smiled with that false kindness he had perfected over the years, telling me, of course, as he gently stroked my hair. Now I realize it was like a farewell gesture, but back then, I was too blind to see it. On the plane, I couldn't contain my excitement as I gazed out the window. In the distance, huge white mountains stood on the horizon and the cool, clear air seemed to promise an unforgettable adventure. My heart was racing with anticipation. This ski competition would be my first major challenge of this kind. I could feel the adrenaline coursing through my veins, making every nerve ending tingle with excitement. For me, this trip represented more than just a competition. It was an opportunity to push beyond my limits, to prove something to myself. When we arrived at the resort, we were enveloped in an atmosphere of luxury and comfort. The lobby fireplace crackled warmly, casting a welcoming glow over the arriving guests. I took a deep breath, savoring that moment of pure joy and anticipation. I was full of life and energy at that moment, completely unaware of the dangers lurking in those mountains that could catch me out. And yet at the time, the threat still felt distant and out of reach to me. That evening, we had dinner by the window overlooking the snow-covered slopes. I raised my wine glass, toasting to us and to what I thought would be an adventure-filled future. Looking back now, I can hardly believe how trusting I was, how completely I had fallen for the illusion of our perfect life together.
Justin mirrored her gesture with an empty smile, raising his glass to meet hers while whispering, to us, his voice a hollow echo of affection. In the depths of his twisted mind, he silently added, to our final adventure, savoring the dark promise of tomorrow. That night, Amy drifted into peaceful slumber in her husband's arms, wrapped in a cocoon of false security. But Justin was not sleeping, just staring coldly at the ceiling. It wasn't the weight of betrayal that kept him from sleep, his heart had long since frozen to such human concerns. Instead, it was the electric anticipation of tomorrow's finale that made rest impossible, the thrill of knowing his elaborate deception was near its end. As dawn slowly broke, the morning light streaming in through the window began to change. Justin rose silently, his movements precise and deliberate as he began preparing for the day that would mark both an ending and a beginning, the death of his marriage and the birth of his new life. The morning air in the Alps mercilessly stung the skin, and fresh snow softly covered the mountains. The wind whispered secrets as it passed through the trees, as if nature itself had a sense of the dark events that were about to occur, its gentle sighs a warning of impending tragedy.
I took a deep breath, savoring the pure, crisp mountain air that filled my lungs. With each step I took forward, I was completely unaware of the danger that was stalking me. Since arriving at the resort, my mind had been consumed with preparation and excitement for the competition. I couldn't allow anything to distract me from my goal. This competition meant everything to me. It was more than just a sporting event, it was my symbol of freedom. It was my chance to prove something to the world, and more importantly, to myself. Looking back now, I realize how focused I was on proving my strength, while being blind to the very real threat that lurked in the shadows.
Meanwhile, Justin was watching Amy with cold eyes, his eyes following her every move as she deftly adjusted her ski boots. Though silent, his heart swelled with dark satisfaction as he saw his plans falling perfectly into place. For Amy, this day promised to be her moment of triumph, but for Justin, she was merely the final obstacle between his old life and the future he so desperately craved. Aaron materialized from the shadows with his characteristic stealth, a man who had studied every treacherous turn, every dangerous crevice, and every betraying path these mountains held. He was undoubtedly prepared for his deadly task, yet this time, an unfamiliar discomfort stirred in his chest. For a mercenary like Aaron, contracts like this were nothing new. He had spent a lifetime doing society's darkest deeds. But something about this assignment disturbed his usually unshakable resolve. Perhaps it was Amy's radiant smile, or the way her soft, innocent voice contrasted so sharply with the cruelty of the man who had ordered her death. Just another job, he muttered to himself, adjusting his gloves as if to brush away these unwelcome thoughts. Justin approached Amy with a controlled smile, asking if she was ready to make history, secretly savoring the knowledge that these would be her final moments. Of course, she replied with a light laugh, blissfully unaware these would be her last words to him. As Amy took to the slopes, her silhouette blended into the snow in the pine forest, creating a graceful dance. Aaron tracked her with predatory precision from afar, his sole mission to ensure this would be her final descent. Yet somehow, against all odds, he found himself developing a quiet respect for her. Ahead lay a narrow passage, a treacherous curve that had claimed many lives before, the destined place where everything was meant to end. But fate had other plans in store. During her descent, Amy lost her balance slightly and fell awkwardly onto the snow. She slid to a stop on the steep slope, the fall not serious but enough to temporarily leave her vulnerable. Aaron quickly caught up to her, recognizing this as the perfect moment to complete his mission. The mercenary approached slowly, focused on his target, feeling adrenaline course through his veins and his breathing quicken. But as he bent down to speak to her, Amy's gaze stopped him in his tracks. She looked at him with eyes full of gratitude, believing him to be a resort staff member coming to her aid. That look of purity, total trust, pierced Aaron's cold heart. "Thank you for coming so quickly," she said with a smile despite her fall, adding that her husband must be worried about her. Those words were the final drop that shattered something irreparable within Aaron. He had thought life held no more surprises for a man who had grown accustomed to betrayal and death. Yet in that moment, he realized he was about to make an unforgivable mistake. Justin hadn't told him everything. This woman was neither threat nor obstacle, but merely an innocent victim. And Aaron knew he could not be her executioner. Taking a deep breath, he made an unprecedented decision in his career. For the first time in his life, he chose to betray his client. "Listen," Aaron said in a low voice as he helped Amy to her feet, "we don't have much time, and what I'm about to tell you will change everything."
I noticed the urgency in the stranger's voice, and though confused at first, I furrowed my brow as I listened. Then he spoke words that seemed impossible to comprehend. My husband had hired him to take my life. He told me that he was supposed to kill me today and make it look like an accident. The air suddenly felt frigid, as if those words had frozen the entire world around me. At that moment, he felt as if the ground beneath his feet was crumbling away, and the snow around him became an endless abyss. "That can't be true," I whispered, stumbling backward, but Aaron held me steady. He apologized softly, telling me that it was the truth and he had no reason to lie. The impact of his words was devastating. I tried to process what I was hearing, but no thoughts would register. How could the man I had loved so deeply plan such a betrayal? The same person who had smiled at me so tenderly, this morning had been plotting my death. For a moment, the entire world lost all meaning. I wanted to scream, to cry, to break something, but the coldness of betrayal had left me paralyzed. Aaron's voice pulled me back to reality, warning me that if I wanted to survive, we needed to act immediately. He explained that my husband believed I would be dead before the race ended, and had no idea Aaron had changed his mind. I swallowed hard and asked what we should do, my eyes burning with anger and pain. Aaron gave me a brief, grim smile as he laid out his plan. We would fake my death. No one would know I was alive, at least not until I chose to reveal myself. I nodded slowly, feeling my despair transform into something new. a mixture of survival instinct and desire for revenge. "I'll do that," I said firmly, determined not to give my husband what he wanted. I could see the respect in Aaron's eyes as he looked at me. Just minutes ago, I had been an innocent, trusting wife, but now I had become a survivor. We worked quickly, wasting no time as we formed our plan. I would appear to have fallen into a deep crevasse during the race, somewhere rescue teams couldn't reach. Everyone would believe I was dead while I hid in the shadows, preparing to reclaim what was mine. The alpine sky had turned an opaque gray, as if nature itself sensed the ominous events unfolding. Through the swirling mist, we prepared our equipment. Standing at the starting point, I took deep breaths to calm my nerves. Inside, I was waging a fierce battle between the pain of betrayal and my desperate will to survive, all while maintaining an outward calm that would fool everyone watching.
Justin, meanwhile, looked at her with a fake smile, but deep in his eyes was the satisfaction of a hunter who knows his prey has been cornered and has no way out. His cold gaze held the calculated pleasure of a man who believed his perfect plan was about to unfold. Those seemingly loving eyes that had once captivated Amy now revealed their true nature, the predatory gleam of a man who had finally trapped his prey.
The cold mountain air stung my skin, but what I felt inside was even sharper, the cold rage of knowing the truth. My usually disciplined mind was now focused on a single mission, executing the plan Aaron and I had devised. I would not let Justin win this deadly game. I was no longer the blindly trusting, loving wife. I had transformed into a survivor who would fight until my last breath. Justin wished me luck with a smile that made my stomach turn. I replied with a quiet calmness, "The same to you," knowing these would be our final words as husband and wife. The starting gun split the air like an omen of what was to come. I launched down the slope at full speed, leaving behind the resort and everything I had once thought was safe. Snow sprayed up beneath my skis as the wind whipped against my face. I continued skiing without fear, as if the speed itself could strip away the wounds Justin's betrayal had carved into my heart. Looking back now, I realize that moment marked the death of the woman I had been and the birth of who I would become.
From his vantage point high in the mountains, Aaron tracked Amy's movements with the precision of a master strategist. Every detail of their plan had been meticulously rehearsed, leaving no room for error in this dangerous deception. They had calculated the exact moment she would disappear and mapped out every action needed to make this staged accident appear tragically real. The course narrowed treacherously, with howling winds sweeping along the cliff edges like nature's own warning signals. It was the perfect spot for someone to vanish without a trace, a place where the mountains themselves would keep their secrets. In this remote corner of wilderness, where the pristine snow could conceal any evidence, their carefully orchestrated plan would unfold.
I knew I had to fake a fatal fall at the final curve of the course. My heart was pounding wildly in my chest, but what I felt wasn't fear, it was pure rage. That anger drove me forward, keeping my mind focused, when it might have otherwise shattered. At the predetermined signal point, I saw Aaron execute his part of the plan with perfect precision from his position above. He triggered a small avalanche, sending snow cascading down in front of my path. I responded to his cue, pretending to lose my balance in a carefully calculated performance. My skis tangled dramatically as my body slid violently toward the cliff's edge. The world around me became a white storm as I disappeared from view. The howling wind swallowed any sound of my supposed fall. From a distance, I knew other skiers and course officials were watching as I vanished into the slope. To them, it must have looked as if the mountain itself had swallowed me whole. In that moment, as I enacted my own disappearance, I couldn't help but appreciate the dark irony. The man who wanted me dead would believe he'd succeeded, but his victory would be his ultimate defeat.
Within seconds, the radio channels erupted with frantic emergency communications, their urgent voices carrying news of the tragedy. At the base of the course, Justin watched the scene unfold, a wave of maniacal pleasure coursing through his body like an electric current. "Soon she'll be officially declared dead," he whispered, unable to contain the twisted smile that crept across his face, his eyes gleaming with dark satisfaction. The moment he had meticulously planned for so long was finally becoming reality, and the thrill of his apparent success threatened to overwhelm his carefully maintained facade of a grieving husband.
In our hidden spot halfway up the mountain, I struggled to my feet with Aaron's help. The impact had been intense, but as planned, I had avoided any serious injuries. The biting cold of the snow was my only reminder that this was all real, not some terrible nightmare. Aaron watched me carefully, asking if I was all right. "I've never felt better," I replied with fierce determination, my fists clenched at my sides. We stayed hidden, waiting for the chaos on the slopes to complete the illusion of my disappearance. From our hideout, I could hear the distant voices of the rescue teams echoing across the mountain. I knew they would never find me. That was exactly the point of our plan. I would need to live under a new identity for a while, until the time came to make Justin pay for all his lies, his empty caresses, and his false words. I noticed Aaron watching me quietly. Something had changed in him, since the moment he'd chosen to abandon his mission. I wasn't just another victim to him anymore. I had become a woman with strength beyond what anyone could have imagined. I had the power to rise even when my heart had been shattered into pieces. When Aaron finally broke the silence, he asked if I was ready for what lay ahead. I met his gaze without hesitation and told him I had no other choice, and failure wasn't an option. In that moment, I felt a strange mix of fear and exhilaration. I was legally dead, but I had never felt more alive.
In the distance, the throbbing sound of search helicopters echoed through the mountains, their futile rescue efforts continuing as Amy's staged death became an accepted reality. Soon, the world would believe she had perished in a tragic mountain accident, while Justin would return to the city, savoring what he believed was his perfect victory. Little did he know that the true tragedy was yet to unfold. As dusk settled over the mountains, Amy's disappearance became a grim certainty that shrouded the entire resort in an atmosphere of anxiety and confusion. The initial search efforts proved fruitless, and with each passing second, hope of survival dimmed like the fading mountain light. Justin moved among the rescue teams and staff with an impeccable mask of grief, offering fragmented responses to their questions while feigning the weight of despair. With a trembling voice that masked his inner triumph, he spoke of how competitive she had been, always pushing her limits. Sympathetic glances followed him as he played the role of the devastated husband to perfection. Yet beneath this carefully crafted facade, a maniacal joy coursed through his veins. Years of waiting had finally culminated in this moment. Everything Amy had built would now be his. As night fell, the rescue team announced the suspension of the search until morning. The bitter cold of night meant certain death for anyone trapped on the mountain. It was nature's final verdict. By all accounts, Amy Miller was dead, swallowed by the savage mountain depths. Later that night, alone in his hotel room, Justin finally allowed himself a genuine smile. His reflection showed a twisted grin of victory, a testament to his cold-blooded execution of the plan. He pulled out his phone and dialed a number he knew by heart. His mistress answered immediately. She eagerly asked if everything had gone according to plan. "Perfect," he whispered with dark satisfaction, savoring the word to the full. He told her he'd return tomorrow and to have everything ready. In his mind, the future was already crystallizing. Amy's fortune would be his, and the life of luxury he'd dreamed of was within reach. In a few days, his only concern would be maintaining the pretense of mourning until the inheritance was officially transferred to his name.
Meanwhile, in a hidden cabin nestled among the snow-covered trees, Aaron and I were preparing for the next phase of our plan. The small wooden structure became our temporary base, sheltering us from the biting wind and cold as we worked out the details of my eventual return. I could feel Aaron observing me, his eyes reflecting a mixture of curiosity and respect. I knew I had surprised him with my strength. I sat by the fireplace, my gaze fixed on the dancing flames. Though my body still ached from the staged fall, my mind was sharper than ever before. The pain of Justin's betrayal had crystallized into pure determination. I wouldn't let him get away with what he'd done. I had survived the ultimate betrayal, and now it was my turn to act. Without taking my eyes from the flames, I asked Aaron how long we would need to stay here. He checked our supplies as he told me it wouldn't be long, we just needed to wait until Justin was completely convinced of my death. Then, he explained, I could return without anyone suspecting the truth. I nodded slowly, accepting patience as my new weapon. I understood the need to wait for the perfect moment. We would strike when Justin felt most secure in his victory, when he believed he had won everything. That would be the moment I would reappear and reclaim everything he had tried to steal from me. The flames cast shadows on the hut walls, and the shadows of my past life danced off into the darkness.
Justin's return to the city was met with a mixture of relief and anticipation. With each passing mile towards home, the weight of years of deception and trickery seemed to slowly melt away. Upon arrival, he wasted no time, immediately arranging for the will reading within days. This would be the final chapter of his masterpiece of deceit. The spacious living room of what he now considered his house alone filled with Amy's lawyers, close friends, and family members. The atmosphere hung heavy with solemnity, though Justin could barely contain the rising impatience that bubbled beneath his carefully crafted mask of grief. "It's still hard to believe Amy is no longer with us," he began in a voice laden with calculated sorrow, his face strategically arranged to reflect deep melancholy. "She was the most remarkable person I've ever known. Without her, I feel completely lost," he continued, his performance worthy of a master actor. Some of those present responded with sympathetic glances, while others nodded silently, all completely convinced by his display of seemingly genuine love. The lawyers began reading the will, methodically working through each legal detail as Justin listened with barely contained excitement. He was moments away from claiming everything he had ever wanted, just one final step remained. Suddenly, the sound of the front door opening echoed throughout the great hall. Conversation ceased instantly, all murmurs died away, and a heavy silence fell like a thick curtain over the assembled group. Every eye in the room turned toward the entrance, drawn by an inexplicable tension that seemed to crackle in the air.
I stood there in the doorway, very much alive and standing tall. My mere presence was enough to shatter the perfect illusion Justin had so carefully constructed. The air in the room went cold and everyone stared at me in disbelief, like they'd seen a ghost. I watched as Justin's perfectly maintained facade crumbled into panic and confusion in an instant. He tried to speak, but the words caught in his throat as I walked toward him with determined steps. I could feel the burning anger in my eyes as I approached him. "Are you surprised, Justin?" I asked in a low, quiet voice, enjoying every word. A deafening silence filled the room as shock and fear played across every face. Before Justin could react, I slammed a bundle of documents onto the table, messages proving his guilt, bank records, and the contract with Aaron. These papers were the undeniable evidence of his betrayal. I watched with cold satisfaction as the color drained from Justin's face as he realized there was no escape. The looks of sympathy around the room quickly turned to contempt. His mask of the grieving husband had crumbled away, leaving him with nothing. He stumbled backward, overwhelmed by the weight of the evidence I had presented. I could see the blood rushing to his face as his mind raced desperately for a solution that wouldn't come. The atmosphere in the room grew heavy, and a thick silence enveloped everything. No one was offering him the benefit of the doubt anymore. When he finally managed to speak my name, his voice was hollow and weak. I stood my ground, watching him with icy calm, almost enjoying the moment his lies came crashing down. There was no hatred in my eyes, only the certainty of justice being served. My return wasn't an impulsive act of revenge. It was a declaration of power, the final blow against my husband's excessive ambition. All this time, I broke the silence with a clear, strong voice. I believed you loved me. I thought we were partners building a life together. But that wasn't enough for you, was it? You wanted everything for yourself. I watched as Justin seemed to feel the room closing in on him, the walls pushing him toward an invisible cliff's edge. He tried to approach me, desperately searching for any crack in my armor. His voice rose to almost a shout as he claimed it had all been a mistake, that he'd lost himself, that he'd been desperate and hadn't known what he was doing. Don't even ask for forgiveness, I cut him off, my voice unwavering. My face showed a perfect blend of disappointment and resolve. For years, I had ignored all the warning signs, refusing to see Justin for who he really was. But that time was over now. The day you decided to kill me was the day you lost every chance you might have had, I told him, my voice cold and empty. Everyone in the room watched with bated breath as the man before them crumbled, consumed by his own ambition. This shadow of the Justin I once knew turned to the lawyers, desperately seeking allies in his confusion. But their faces showed only contempt and distrust. The truth was out, and there was no going back. As each second passed, the weight of silence became more unbearable. Finally, one of the lawyers slowly closed the file containing the will, ending the proceedings. He quietly stated that this was now a legal matter, avoiding Justin's gaze as if mere proximity could contaminate him. The other attendees began to leave in solemn silence. Justin stood isolated, exposed, and humiliated, a man whose perfectly cultivated image had crumbled before everyone's eyes, revealing him as the social pariah he truly was. This can't be happening, he whispered in a broken voice. I met his gaze with a calm expression tinged with quiet cruelty. Moving slightly closer, I lowered my voice so only he could hear. You're the one who can't be forgiven. I'm just here to watch you sink. I watched as Justin staggered toward the door, cold sweat running down his neck, his legs shaking. The inescapable reality was crushing him, making it hard for him to breathe. Outside, the consequences he tried so hard to avoid were waiting, a life without money, friends, or anything else. When he stepped outside, the world must have felt colder and more hostile than ever before. The wind cut at his face, but I knew the real cold was inside him. Stripped of everything, he was nothing more than a man reduced to ashes by his own desires. I stood quietly in the house, the outside commotion fading away until all external sounds became meaningless. A sense of relief began mixing with unexpected sadness in my heart. I had won, but the victory had come at a great cost. The scars weren't visible, but they were there, serving as constant reminders. I trusted everything to someone who didn't deserve it, I whispered to myself. Aaron appeared beside me, quiet as a shadow, knowing exactly when to be present. He didn't say anything, but his presence alone gave me the peace I had been seeking. He wasn't a hero or a man without a past, but he had proven himself trustworthy. Are you okay? Aaron finally broke the silence with his gentle voice. I looked at him for a moment, considering his question seriously. Yes, my heart is finally at peace, I replied, and I meant it. The nightmare was over. Justin could no longer have any power over me. The future stretched out before me like a blank page, pure and untouched. What I would write on it could be decided later. There was no need to rush, I had time. We stood together in silence for a while, experiencing the strange yet welcome quiet that follows a storm. For the first time in what felt like forever, I could breathe freely, the weight lifted from my shoulders. I caught Aaron watching me, his eyes filled with respect and something deeper. We didn't need words between us. We understood how we had both changed through this ordeal. Though our path ahead was uncertain, we knew we would walk it together. Not as savior and saved, but as two people who had been wounded by their pasts, ready to build something new. Let's leave this place, I finally said with a slight smile. Aaron nodded, no more words were necessary. We walked side by side toward the exit. The wind might have been howling outside, but it didn't matter anymore. We had survived. We had overcome the deepest betrayal and emerged stronger. The world was ours now, and we had nothing left to fear. Together, we stepped toward an uncertain future. We walked away from the ruins of deception. Whatever fate had in store for us no longer mattered. We had learned how to rise from the ashes. And that, more than anything, was the greatest freedom of all.
Meanwhile, Justin wandered aimlessly through the city streets as a fine drizzle soaked him to the bone, yet he made no attempt to seek shelter. The physical cold, penetrating as it was, couldn't match the frozen solitude of having lost everything he once believed was his. His steps grew heavier with each stride, as if his own legs were rebelling against moving forward. Cast out from the house he had sought to control, humiliated before those who had praised him with false devotion, and abandoned by his mistress the moment his plans crumbled, he was a man stripped of everything. Despair slowly consumed him. Amy's eyes still burned in his memory, that unwavering, defiant gaze that seemed to pierce him from within. The moment she had cornered him without fear or hesitation had exposed everything he truly was. Deep in his heart, he knew there was no way back. Now that all his deceptions had crumbled like sand through his fingers, he was a ghost, unable to escape the ruins of his own desires. A world without money, friends, or allies enveloped him, leaving him with nothing but the shadows of his mistakes. When he tried to return to the apartment he had secretly shared with his mistress, he found the locks had been changed without warning. He had been discarded like a worn-out tool, cast aside without a second thought. He pounded desperately on the door, calling out her name, but was met with silence. The reality was more painful than he had imagined. The woman who had shared his dreams of freedom and power had abandoned him the moment he became useless. With no options left, he wandered until he found a shabby hotel. The indifferent desk clerk handed him a key without acknowledging his disheveled state. Justin dragged himself up the narrow stairs and collapsed onto the bed in his cheap assigned room. The cracked ceiling loomed above him, with only the sound of rain against the window for company. In his mind, the events at the mansion swirled in an uncontrollable vortex, Amy's controlled expression as she exposed his betrayal, the shocked faces of the guests, and the abyss that had swallowed his entire world. He squeezed his eyes shut, but couldn't stop the memories from flooding back. There was no escape from the prison he had built for himself. Every word he had spoken, every message he had sent, every carefully woven line now turned into blades that cut him deeply. Everything had ended in the worst possible way, and the consciousness of his failure continued to tear at his soul. He slowly sat up and searched for his last resort hidden in his bag. He found an almost empty bottle of whiskey and a bottle of pills. The thought of ending it all crept into his mind like a whisper. What was the point of continuing when nothing remained? Drinking, closing his eyes, and surrendering to darkness seemed like the only exit. He stared at this choice calmly for several minutes. Without tears or anger, just an unbearable emptiness threatening to consume him. He lifted the glass to his lips, feeling the burning sensation of whiskey slide down his throat. Suddenly, Amy's face appeared in his mind again, but this time not as his victim. This time she appeared as the woman who had outsmarted him, who had defeated him with wisdom and determination. Her triumph tormented him more than his own downfall, cutting deeper than any other pain. In a burst of rage, he hurled the glass against the wall. It shattered, whiskey streaming down the wall, broken glass scattering across the floor, but even the sound of destruction brought no comfort. Despair remained, clinging to him like a shadow that refused to leave. He closed his eyes again, searching for any memory untainted by failure, but found nothing. Everything he had once possessed, everything he had built, was nothing more than a broken illusion. In the dark room, time crawled by with excruciating slowness. The distant sound of rain gradually became a hypnotic rhythm. Exhaustion enveloped him, promising sleep that never came. The night seemed endless, holding him in its quiet judgment. He was alone, and this solitude felt eternal. There was no redemption for someone like him. He had crossed a line from which there was no return, and now he had to pay the price. This was absolute solitude. In the end, he didn't take the pills. Not because he had found hope, but because the thought of Amy knowing he had surrendered was more unbearable than death itself. He couldn't give her that satisfaction. If living a miserable life was his only way of revenge, he would cling to that small possibility. Defeat had destroyed him, but it hadn't completely erased his existence. That was his final victory, survival, even if it meant living as a ghost. When morning came, Justin was still awake, his eyes bloodshot, his body immobile. The city was awakening outside the dirty window, but the new day brought no promises or chances for a fresh start. Amy's life would continue, moving forward without his presence. That was the cruelest punishment of all. He slowly stood up, realizing that each step forward would be an endless penance. His fall had been destructive, but the real punishment was only beginning.
I woke up early that morning, feeling the gentle yet inescapable weight of the silence around me. The house, now completely mine, no longer held any ghosts, yet the peace I should have found after removing Justin wasn't quite complete. My regained freedom felt like an ill-fitting dress, it just didn't fit. I rose slowly, allowing the morning stillness to claim the space. Outside, the city continued its daily routine, seemingly indifferent to everything I had experienced. In the kitchen, Aaron was quietly making coffee, his movements deliberate and measured. Morning light filtered through the windows, bathing the room in a soft golden glow. I watched the scene for a moment, lost in quiet but deep contemplation. There was something about his presence that both puzzled and comforted me. He wasn't an ordinary man, he was exactly what I needed at this moment in my life. Our relationship defied clear definition, it wasn't about debt or obligation, it had simply evolved naturally. Aaron asked me if I'd slept well, his quiet voice not demanding an immediate response. I took the coffee he offered, but didn't answer right away, feeling that words weren't necessary. We sat at the table together, watching the city slowly wake up. There was no need to rush, this was a time for reflection rather than action. I understood that the path I traveled had changed me irrevocably. I was no longer the woman who once believed she had a perfect life. I wasn't the wife who had blindly trusted Justin anymore. I had become something new, stronger, but also deeply aware of the cost of that strength. After a while, Aaron asked what I planned to do now, his voice free of pressure or expectation. I considered the question carefully, searching for meaning in his words. "I'm going to live," I finally replied, a small but definite smile in my voice. "This time, for myself." Aaron nodded and said nothing more, he had learned. We understood each other without words. We had survived something that could have completely destroyed us. That experience had forged a quiet but powerful bond between us. I felt no need to prove anything anymore. I didn't need to seek revenge against Justin or validation from the people who had once surrounded me. Everything I needed was within myself and in the quietness that was slowly but surely taking root. After finishing my coffee, I decided to take a walk. The city streets that I had once seen as a stage for my success now looked different. I walked without a destination, letting my feet guide me. I observed the daily lives of people around me, with new eyes, finding meaning in simple things I had never noticed before. The burden of past expectations had vanished, along with the need to constantly chase after something. When I passed a bookstore, I stopped. I realized I hadn't read a book in a while. Once, I had devoured books about strategy and business biographies, always searching for inspiration for my next project. But now I wanted something different, stories far removed from achievement and ambition. Without hesitation, I went inside and browsed the shelves. A title caught my eye, a novel about personal redemption. I bought it and left the store feeling lighter than I had in ages. Back home, I sat on the sofa with the book in my hands, simply enjoying the moment. The past was still there, but it no longer had power over me. I knew my scars would never completely fade, but instead of hiding them, I chose to accept them as proof of my strength. The journey hadn't been easy, but I had made it. That was enough. Aaron watched me from across the room, and he didn't need to ask anything. We both understood that our future life wouldn't be perfect, but that was okay. What mattered was that we were alive and had found a path beyond the pain. And whatever came next, we were ready to face it together. Aaron broke the silence with a slight smile, asking if I was ready for a new beginning. I looked up from my book, sensing his question didn't need an immediate answer. Yes, I replied with conviction, and I meant it with all my heart. The sun was rising slowly over the city, its soft light heralding a new beginning. From my apartment balcony, I felt its warmth on my skin. I had left many things in the past, but I didn't regret any of it. I didn't have certainty, but I didn't need it anymore. My eyes were no longer bound by the expectations that had once controlled me. I was finally free from the need to fulfill everything except myself. Inside the house, I watched as Aaron packed a few belongings into his worn backpack. We had decided to leave the city, not running away, but making a conscious choice to distance ourselves from the relics of our past. There was nothing left to keep us here anymore. The silence between us was comfortable, the kind that exists only between people who don't need many explanations. Trust flowed between us, and that was enough. Aaron appeared behind me, with his backpack over his shoulder, asking if I was ready to go. I smiled, still gazing at the horizon unhurried. Yes, I'm ready, I replied. We didn't need many possessions anymore. Material weight had lost its meaning to us. What mattered now were the intangible things, freedom and the possibility of rebuilding. We couldn't change what had happened in the past, but we chose to accept it as part of who we were. That was our true victory. We had survived, and despite our scars, we were still moving forward. We left the apartment with quiet steps, never looking back. Goodbyes were already in the past, and we had no reason to hold on. An old car waited for us as we descended the stairs to the street. Though we had no clear destination, we were certain we would never return to our old selves. The road stretched before us, open and uncertain, but that uncertainty now felt more like a promise than a threat. We drove for hours, feeling the landscape change around us in our comfortable silence. The city disappeared behind us, replaced by mountains and winding roads. Trees with leaves painted by the changing seasons swayed as if welcoming us. Looking out the window, I felt each mile taking us further from the lies that had once tried to consume me. The fresh air streaming through the window carried the promise of a new beginning. Any regrets? Aaron asked quietly, keeping his eyes on the road. I didn't answer immediately, thinking about everything I'd experienced, the decisions I'd made, and the difficult moments that had shaped me. The journey hadn't been easy, but I had learned more than I ever imagined possible. No, I finally answered, with a certainty that surprised even me. Everything has led me here. That's enough. Aaron nodded slightly, understanding the deep meaning behind those words. Sometimes it's not about avoiding the pain, but accepting it and learning to walk forward without being bound by it, I reflected on Aaron's words. We continued driving, time and landscape weaving together in a quiet melody. The road stretched ahead of us, and we had no need to look back. With no maps or plans, life itself had become an open adventure, and we were ready to face it. We found a small mountain village, and decided to spend the night there. The place was quiet and welcoming, offering us a simple room overlooking a peaceful, green valley. I stood by the window, gazing at the emerging stars. Each star reminded me of how vast the universe was and how small our problems really were. Yet somehow, in that moment, everything felt perfect. Aaron sat on the edge of the bed, quietly watching me. There was a different kind of light in me now, one that had almost been extinguished many times but had finally found its way to shine. When he softly asked what I was thinking about, I turned to him with a gentle, smiling expression. For the first time in a long while, I feel like I'm exactly where I want to be. Aaron held my gaze for a moment, before lying back on the bed with a contented sigh, telling me that was enough. That night, I allowed myself something I had forgotten, the luxury of closing my eyes without worry and surrendering to sleep. For the first time in years, there were no fears, no secrets to hide, no shadows pursuing me. The past was behind us, and though the future was uncertain, it no longer frightened me. The mountain air blew in a quiet blessing through the window. The darkness of the room was warm and comforting, and the silence of that moment felt like a gift. At dawn, I woke to the first rays of sunlight filtering through the curtains. I felt a peace I had never known before. The future was still unwritten, but that now excited rather than terrified me. I slowly rose from the bed, watching the morning's golden light illuminate the valley, knowing I had found what I needed. This wasn't about starting over, it was my second chance to become who I had always meant to be. "Let's go," I said softly, gently touching Aaron's shoulder to wake him. He opened his eyes slowly, a smile spreading across his face before he even spoke. Still sleepy, he asked if I was ready. I nodded, and we left the room without looking back, walking forward quietly. The world was waiting for us outside. And this time, we were ready for everything life had to offer.
Share your thoughts with us in the comments below. Which part of the story surprised you the most? How did you feel about the unexpected twists in this tale of betrayal and redemption? Don't forget to subscribe and turn on notifications to ensure you never miss our next story filled with drama and emotion. If you enjoyed this journey of survival and second chances, please hit that like button. And share this experience with your friends. Let them join us in exploring these compelling stories of love, loss, and triumph. We'll be back soon with another powerful story that will touch your heart.